Hello and welcome to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. Today our guest is Angela Seeger, who's currently completing her Doctorate of Health Psychology at Deakin University. And today's topic we're going to be talking about is goal setting, reaching our goals. Welcome to the program, Angela.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give our viewers a little bit of your background, what sort of things you've achieved and done so far?
Yeah, so a doctorate in health psychology works a lot around health behaviour change. So we do a lot of training around helping people achieve their goals. And currently I'm at a placement at Independence Australia, which works with people with physical disabilities.
And you've also run some workshops too, haven't you?
Yeah, as a part of that placement, I've helped co-facilitate a pain management workshop, which includes a lot of behaviour change strategies. And also I've helped co-develop a health and wellbeing workshop series for people with living with a disability.
Wow, okay. Now let's say for goal setting, we'll give a scenario, an interesting scenario, something a little bit difficult. Someone wants to become really healthy in their diet and they're surrounded by people who are eating pretty much unhealthy food, and they're constantly bombarded by TV and media with unhealthy advertising for food that's all cooked and processed.
Yes.
They want to go on a raw diet, a fresh healthy fruit diet with lots of abundance of seeded plant food, and they only know a few people doing it. Not many people are that strict. How could you help someone in a scenario like that to overcome their obstacles and reach their goals?
Yeah, and changing, having a really big outcome goal like that is quite common. So we call goals like that where you have a desired, state of being or desired behaviour an outcome goal. So this is where we think that we want to be living in a certain way or be a certain weight, for example. Unfortunately, they're very difficult to obtain without breaking them down a little bit further. So it's sort of like attempting to build a house without actually having the know-how of how to go about that and achieve that. So in the example that you've given, we would try and break that outcome goal down into a series of process goals. So process goals are actual goals that are daily behaviours. So for example, rather than saying I would like to sort of have a whole vegan diet, for example, what's one thing that you would want to change specifically? And we'd try to adapt your overall behaviour and break it down into changing small habits one at a time.
So say the person wants to be eating only raw, fresh fruit, seeded plant food, like savoury, like fruit, tomatoes. Tomatoes are fruit and avocados are fruit, plums, watermelon, everything. That's all they want to eat. And they know people who are doing it and they're thriving in their health and energy levels. And they want to do it one all at once. Is that advisable? Can they do it just at once and turn over and say, that's it, tonight I'm starting and I'm going to be a fruitarian tomorrow? Can they do that?
Look, it would be very challenging to do that all at once. It takes a lot of willpower, and willpower is something that, it's not an infinite resource. We have a sort of allocated amount of willpower, and resisting urges or changing habits takes a lot of willpower. So it might be more advisable to break it down and change one element at a time. So for example, removing one part of your diet that you don't want in there and then introducing some part that you do want in there. So for example, maybe at breakfast time, if you're eating toast and you'd prefer to change that to fruit, maybe you could develop a process goal where you would be attempting to only eat fruit for breakfast, perhaps Monday to Thursday, for example. And
then you change it. After you've achieved that, then you could change it. Okay, I'll increase it to lunchtime.
Yeah, so once you've developed a habit, so the habit forming is the most tricky part of changing your behaviour. So developing a habit requires a lot of concerted effort. So if you have maintained eating fruit from Monday to Thursday, for example, for a month, then you might be able to sit down and reflect and say, okay, so I've achieved that process goal. Now what's the next stage of my behaviour change in order to become a fruitarian, for example? And then you might introduce doing it Monday to Sunday, for example, or maybe you'll introduce it at lunchtime as well. And so what this is doing is, rather than depleting all of your willpower, which you have a certain amount every day, you'll be able to just use your willpower and actually achieve your goal.
Okay. And have some people will say they did do it overnight. They said they got a book, they read about it, and they met someone or they spoke to someone and they thought, that's it, I'm doing it overnight, and they've done it overnight.
Yeah.
With those, how would they differ from someone who's done it slowly?
Well, I guess some people do have some sort of life-changing event or piece of information that they take on. And so there are theories that explain how people can completely overhaul their behaviour overnight. And it's got to do with the perception of your health and how you perceive your health and how adequately you'll be able to change your behaviour overnight and the outcomes that you'll be able to achieve from that. So in the case of overhauling your behaviour overnight, maybe there was some piece of information that you obtained that was so sort
powerful,
of earth-shattering on a very fundamental level that you're able to overhaul your whole behaviour overnight. But for most people, that doesn't happen, and having the conception that you will be able to completely change yourself and change all of your behaviours in one attempt, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people fail their health behaviour change goals.
That's interesting, because I remember I went to this health farm years ago and I'd read about it, and I read about all raw vegan and everything, and then I went to the health farm and I remember speaking to the person that ran the farm and I said, no problem, I'll be doing this forever. There's no way. And he goes, you probably have to come back once a year. And I'm thinking, maybe he's just wanting the money. He wants to keep, And then he goes, because it's really hard. And I thought, no, it's not hard. It's not hard. And I went off and I really had done it, I think, for a year on my own. And then after a year, I thought, no, it is getting a bit hard. Yes. So I'd sort of go there once a year in the end anyway, just to sort of be around those people and get that sort of, input back in.
Yeah, so what happens in situations when we're in environments where a lot of people aren't conforming to the behaviour that you would like, then you're needing to resist urges that are in your environment all of the time. So for example, if you're constantly seeing, poor food choices on the television, etc., then you're more likely to have to resist those urges on a regular basis. And these things all deplete our willpower. Every time we need to resist an urge, we deplete our willpower. So it takes a long time for these habits to become fully formed, and it's only when a habit is fully formed that it no longer uses up our willpower.
That's interesting, because I spoke with someone. I was interviewing some other people around, not all on Channel 31, but just interviewing them anyway for camera. We were going to put on Channel 31 some of the shows, and one man, he had bowel cancer, and he said he's 100% raw vegan, and he really wants to do it 100%, and he's going out helping other people with cancer. And then he said to me, if he ever gave into it, it would be because of all the constant advertising all around him that would have made him go back to eating cooked food.
Right.
And in the end he did go back to eating cooked food, yeah.
Right.
And anyway, we'll have to go to a break now.
Okay.
You're watching Nat Chat. Stay with us. We'll be back very shortly. Hello and welcome back to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. If you've just joined us, we're here with Angela Seeger, who is doing her Doctorate of Health Psychology at Deakin University. Welcome to the program, Angela. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And before we're talking about these goal setting, I'm going to give you a scenario. Say, for example, I'll be the guinea pig here. I want to be a fruitarian. I want to do it overnight. How would you treat me? What advice, or how will we go about setting these goals?
Okay, well, first of all, we'd probably try and make your goal a little bit more realistic in terms of the time-bound element. So when we change our outcome goals, which is I want to be a fruitarian, to process goals, which is the stages you actually need to, like what the steps you need to do to get to that outcome goal, we need to make them realistic. And so one of the first steps that we would do would be to break it down into which element you can change in your diet first, and we would choose a time that we would evaluate whether you had achieved that. So the 5 criteria for making one of the better process goals would be to make them specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic and time-based. So that's a SMART goal. And so if you make a process goal that meets all of these 5 criteria, then you're on your way to achieving a successful behaviour change. So with the fruitarian example, we'd try and make it specific. So the specific might be which particular fruits that you wanted to eat for breakfast. Measurable, how much fruit would you eat for breakfast? Would it be 1 cup? Action oriented, so obviously it's the eating that's the action. Is it realistic? Do you think that you'll be able to eat fruit every day for breakfast? And then time bound, so we've got the 1 month element that we're going to reflect on this goal and see whether you've achieved it.
Okay, so we try it for a month, and that's just eating fruit for breakfast for the month.
Yes.
And then the next month after you evaluate, you can bring it to lunch.
So you sit down after a month and you see whether you have actually successfully achieved that behaviour change. So after a month, you most likely have formed a new habit. So you get to 1 month and 1 day, you'll wake up and you'll just want your fruit for breakfast. You won't revert back to what you were eating before.
So in that way, it takes like 30 days to perhaps develop a new habit, would you say?
It depends. It changes depending on the person and the behaviour. You most likely have a very well established, fully formed habit after 6 weeks, but then other habits can be formed earlier than that as well.
Oh, okay. So 6 weeks is a general rule to learn a new habit, would you say?
It's one of the more widely used timeframes, yes.
Okay, so try something for 6 weeks, and then it can become a habit after 6 weeks.
Yes.
Because they used to say 3 weeks, didn't they?
Oh, that's another theory.
Yeah.
Yes. So it varies.
Well, this is
from a couple of weeks
is more
to 6
up-to-date
months.
information though that you might have.
Possibly, it might just it might differ between different health professionals as well.
It's interesting because I know someone who is a fruitarian, and she's been a fruitarian for 30 years.
Okay.
And from my knowledge and what she's told me, she changed overnight. She became a fruitarian. That was it. And there was no sort of lead up, and there was no slow build up. It was just like a definite thing. I'm going to be a fruitarian because I just love fruit. Yeah. And that's it.
So some of the things that might have impacted on her being able to change that overnight may have been a values-based action. So she might have been confronted with some information that was contradictory to her values as a person regarding how she was currently behaving. Another thing that might have come into it would have been how she actually exercised her willpower. So she may have removed all of the other previous foods that she was eating out of her environment, and therefore she wouldn't be tempted to eat those anymore. So she may have used all of her willpower to remove all of those other foods from her environment, just brought in foods that were in accordance with that chosen diet, and then she could just follow through with that chosen behaviour from that point.
Okay, it's interesting. Some have like a resolute mindset. Nothing will back them down. They'll be so driven and so focused, whereas other people will need a slow more lead up into it. Yeah,
and I think that a few different things that might come into that would be the amount of temptations that people need to resist on a daily basis. So for example, if someone wished to improve their healthy eating, for example, they may be tempted to eat unhealthy foods at regular points through the day. So maybe at work there are, unhealthy foods available to them. They've got to resist that temptation. Then again at lunch, then again at afternoon tea. And the more that they need to resist those temptations, the more their willpower will deplete. By the end of the day, they are so depleted of willpower that they actually just revert to their old habit, and they don't have the willpower left to actually engage in their chosen health behaviour.
Wow, so if they're exercising it so much throughout the day, then there's more likelihood that they'll give up. Whereas if they've cut out all the temptations, made it easier for themselves, they're on a smoother ride.
Exactly. Oh, wow. So people have an amount of willpower, and it's how you actually use it that will determine how successful you are in your chosen behaviour.
And how much willpower do we each have a day? How much doses of willpower does everyone have?
It can vary,
Sounds like
and it can be depleted by other things as well. So willpower is also depleted by decision making. So if you're in a high stress job and you have to make a lot of decisions all morning, you may find that you don't have the willpower left at lunchtime to make positive choices.
Isn't that interesting? And it can be nothing to do with what your goal is.
No,
if you've just burnt yourself out with other things, by the time the goal's out the window because you're just like burnt out through all the other things in your life.
That's right, and we often make positive choices in the morning as opposed to in the afternoon. By the afternoon, we've had to make so many different decisions and resist so many temptations that we don't have any willpower left to make good decisions. So people who make the decision to exercise or eat well in the morning and actually prepare themselves for that, they may take their gym clothes to work and they may prepare their lunches in advance, for example, they're more likely to follow through with that behaviour because the decision's already been made and they don't need to make it at the time.
All right, we'll have to continue with that. You're watching Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich and we'll be back with more very shortly. Hello and welcome back to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. If you've just joined us, we're here with Angela Seeger, who is currently completing her Health Doctorate in Psychology at Deakin University. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about making the decisions for your goal setting early in the or first thing in the morning.
Yes,
Let's elaborate on that.
Yeah, so as we were talking about willpower before, so willpower it depletes throughout the day. Yeah. So if you have decisions to make about your health and about the behaviours you would like to do during the day, it's best to make them in the morning because once you've made the decision, all then you need to do is follow through with the behaviour. Okay. So the willpower that you exercise throughout the day is going to deplete, and if you need to make those decisions in the evening, you're more likely to just revert to your old habits and less likely to make a change.
Okay, so have the structure and the day set in the morning. And then throughout our day, everyone knows there's ups and downs and things, unexpected things can happen and sometimes do happen during the day that may grate on us a little bit and make us weaken our willpower. Why does this happen and what can we do to get around it?
Yeah, so willpower can be depleted by a range of different things. So it can be from making decisions and also resisting urges. So resisting urges to perhaps eat something unhealthy, for example, but also making decisions. So making decisions around your job. So if you are making decisions at work all day and then you need to make a decision regarding your health, if you've depleted your willpower, you're less likely to follow through with the changed behaviour. You're more likely to revert to the status quo.
And how do you stop your willpower from being depleted?
So you stop your willpower being depleted by not using it, and the way you don't need to use it is by forming habits. So what you do every day at the moment, you don't need to use willpower to do that. It's what you do every day, and so all you're doing is following through with your normal behaviour. So once you have established a new behaviour and a new habit, then you don't need to use your willpower anymore.
Okay, so it's just like repeating the new behaviour over and over and over again until that new behaviour just becomes normal habit.
That's right, and so we use the SMART goal criteria of being specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic and time-paced. And that if we meet those criteria with our process goals, then we can establish a new habit and we evaluate it at the end of the time that we set, so perhaps a month, perhaps 6 weeks, and we reflect on whether we've established our habit or not, or whether we need to amend it and make it more appropriate.
Okay. It's interesting because there are some people who say they did achieve a goal, like say for example being a fruitarian, overnight. They did it overnight and that was it. And then other people it takes a lot longer to achieve that goal. Why is it so easy for someone to do it overnight and do it for 30 years and someone else struggle for like 20 years or 18 years to try and do it?
Yeah, look, it's a tricky one. The person who might manage the change overnight may have exercised all of their willpower to remove any other temptation in their environment, and then just included all of the fruitarian correct, I guess, foods in their environment, and then they don't need to resist urges all day. Whereas other people who are needing to resist the urges of not eating a fruitarian diet every day are more likely to regress and go back to their old habits. So it's about exercising our willpower in the appropriate way, so that all we need to do is follow through with our chosen decision, and we don't need to resist urges of reverting back to old behaviours.
It's interesting because I actually asked someone that's been running a health farm, a raw health farm, and he was saying to me, I said, well, you're lucky because you're living out in the mountains and you're just growing fruit, so it's so easy to do it there. He goes, no, I have to go into the town every day because he was running a chiropractic clinic, and all of that stuff's right in front of me across the road from my work, and it's everywhere around me, but I don't still give in to it.
Okay, so perhaps he'd already established a habit where he never actually went and, it gave into those temptations. So it's about what we commonly do. What we are is what we commonly do, and if you never give into the habit, if you never give it into temptation, then you're never resisting it in the first place. It's changing the habit that's the most difficult part. It's not following through with the habit once it's formed.
Okay, so changing the habit's the hardest part.
That's right.
But yet some people can do it so easily. Why is that, do you think?
Well, some people might change very significantly overnight if they're confronted with a significant piece of information that makes them realise that they're not living by their values. So some people, perhaps if people who are eating meat, for example, and see something quite traumatic about the treatment of animals who, they may actually become a vegan or vegetarian overnight because they realise that the current behaviour is not in line with their values. So that sort of very significant information can help someone change overnight. However, for most of us, it's a process of incrementally changing small behaviours, achieving those behaviour change goals, and then adapting them upon evaluation.
Okay, and in your own experience, have you used these kind of goal-setting techniques to whatever you've wanted to achieve in your life?
Yeah, look, I commonly reflect on what I've been doing. If I'm finding myself reverting to some unhealthy behaviours that I'm not that happy with, I might sit down and reflect about, okay, so why am I doing this more now? Is it serving a purpose? Or am I just not being prepared enough with what I would like to do? And then putting some strategies in place to re-establish a more healthy habit.
Okay. It seems to me like we need to be vigilant constantly with ourselves to assess how we're going with our goals.
Yeah, look, I think it takes a lot of self-reflection and thinking about what you're currently doing and why you're doing it. So if you sit down and you think about, are you doing these behaviours because that's what you've always done, or it takes a lot of energy to research healthier ones, or perhaps it's sort of a coping mechanism, so some people might do certain things to make them feel better. So sitting down and thinking about what purpose each of these things serve, and then putting in substitutes in place. We can't just stop behaviours, we need to substitute it with something more healthy.
And sometimes things are addictive, like eating cooked food is addictive, so that's why it's hard to give it up.
Yeah, look, that can come into it as well. So if there's something that, is very, very tempting for you, then coming up with a strategy or a solution that can take its place might be useful.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on the program. Would you like to come back next week? We'll continue.
That'd be great.
Okay. You've been watching Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich and our guest was Angela Seeger. We'll see you again next week.